Hi and welcome. I'm Steve Martirano, and this is the Behavioral Corner. You're invited to hang with us as we discuss the ways we live today, the choices we make, the things we do, and how they affect our health and well-being. So you're on the corner, the Behavioral Corner. Please hang around a while. Hey everybody, what's up? Steve Martirano with you here on the Behavioral Corner. You know how the deal is. We've staked our claim to this little intersection. We call it the Behavioral Corner. It's an interesting spot. We run into all kinds of people, most of whom are here to tell us their story because it has something to do with the way they've behaved and how that's affected their life. But it's a bigger story. We try to get stories about things people are talking about, things that they're doing that affect our behavioral health, because the way we behave winds up to a great extent shaping the way we feel spiritually, emotionally, you know, the whole thing. It's the Behavioral Corner. We're real lucky. Again, it's amazing. Coming out of the bodega across the street, guess who I bump into? Sort of an old pal, but I'll tell you the story ahead. A fellow by the name of AJ Daulerio. Before I get AJ on the air with us now, just a little background for you. AJ Daulerio is really like Icarus, who flew high, and some people say too high. And just like the Icarus story, AJ crashed and burned. There's no other way to put it. His tribulations occurred, this is what's fascinating, at the intersection of something old and something new. The new thing was new media. The old thing was an old law, the First Amendment. And the subsequent collision that occurred resulted in this monumental lawsuit, which destroyed businesses, reputations, and left AJ himself personally in the hole for millions of dollars. Let me repeat that. Millions of dollars. And I think he'll tell you only had like a couple of $100 in his pocket at the moment. Incidentally, we haven't even gotten into the role that Hulk Hogan plays in this, or somebody by the name of Bubba the Love Sponge. You can't make this stuff up, right? Anyway, look, it's true. We know this, that there's no good time to undergo a personal calamity. AJ's woes were even more difficult because they were occurring against the backdrop of him trying to get sober. Not a good time to try that, but you got to try it when you got to try it. So that's the kind of big picture. We have AJ with us now to discuss on the corner the details of this story. And I'm telling you, it is a hell of a story about wreck and ruin and the road back. AJ Daulerio, thanks for joining us, bud.
Steve, that intro made me, I was like, man, I'm interested in hearing that story.
So real quick, you start out writing in Philadelphia, LaSalle graduate. You want to be a writer. You got your eyes on New York. You wrote in Philadelphia for some time with some distinction. But of course, any writer worth his salt is looking up I-95 at the Apple, going to New York. That's where I want to go. You get there and in rapid succession, find yourself really in the catbird seat at the dawn of new media, writing for a company called Gawker, 7 websites, who, by the way, before they crashed and burned, were doing something like 250 million web pages. Okay, so it's a big deal. AJ worked for one of those websites. In fact, he was the boss, Deadspin. AJ, tell us about Deadspin.
Sure. Just to walk back a little bit, just like I first went to New York in 99 and then went back to Philadelphia, worked at Philadelphia Magazine for a year, and then did not... I'd seen New York already and I went back to Philadelphia, and Philadelphia didn't seem like it was going to be a good place for me. So I went back and then I started at Deadspin. And Deadspin, at the time when I got there, was probably one of the most beloved sports blogs. And it was run by my very good friend, Will Leach, for about 3 years. He was going on to greener pastures at New York Magazine. I, at that time, was a full-time employee, but not an editor. I had put my hat in the ring for the job. And 13 other people had to decline the job before my ultimate boss, Nick Denton, decided he wanted to have me there. And I still was kind of on a trial run for my first 3 months. It was myself and a man named Clay Travis, who was actually just there to be managing editor, who went on to dark and scary things after that. But it was one of those moments where I knew that this was my chance to really kind of build a career the way I wanted to build a career, because I wasn't necessarily into sports, but I was into chaos. and I was into being, theatrical, and humor and humorous essays were really kind of just what I wanted to write about. I kind of cartwheeled through journalism. Journalism was a little bit of my background, but I'm not a capital J school person by any stretch of the imagination. But, what I was always good at when I was a reporter was getting people to tell me stuff they wouldn't tell anybody else. That was a skill that I had. And that was, I tried to use that at Deadspin early on. I mean, we were doing straight reported stories, little ones, obviously, but it was original content in a landscape that was, blogging was more, takes on various other people, linking to other people's stuff. So yeah, I had some success with that for the first couple of years. And then, I decided to, here's the thing. It's just, as much as that job was probably a job that most people coveted who were in the blogging sphere, especially the sports blogging community. I hated sports blogs. I hated the sports blog community. I hated feeling like I had to participate and be part of this fraternity because I didn't want to be a part of it.
So you had something in common with Buzz Bissinger.
Yes. and we I crossed paths, I think, later in my tenure there. But I just did not want to play a game that everyone else was playing. Here was the thing. It was just, I think there is this perception in legacy media that everyone that was working for a blog was just a disgruntled wannabe journalist who wanted to kind of just
kid in the basement in his pajamas. We know the cliche.
Yeah,
kid in the basement. The Rupert Pupkin of new media. I get it, man. I can see you saying, you know what, I'll do this, but here's what I'm really about. I'm really about breaking things.
Yeah.
Literally and figuratively.
Right.
And boy, ain't I lucky. I was born at the moment when a giant technology has emerged that is in large part dedicated to exactly that. Anybody has a voice and can break anything they want.
Yeah. And I think that I developed a really well-earned reputation for not giving a crap about playing by the inverted pyramid journalism rules of yore, which, 3 sources, don't pay for stuff, don't pay for information. Right. There was no off the record in my transactional thing that I had. But I mean, I had this one moment that I, just briefly, and because you're kind of an old school media guy, you'll appreciate this. There was a story about Josh Hamilton, who was, at the time playing for the Rangers, and then was a great comeback story because of his dealing with addiction and substance misuse for most of his life, and, had become the feel-good story of really the sporting world. And I had gotten a tip that he had relapsed. So I checked around with it because I used to do this, where I would call the beat writers at the local papers. And I remember calling someone at the Austin American-Statesman about this tip about Josh Hamilton. And he was very condescending to me, nevertheless. And he was ultimately like, we're around these guys all the time. If Josh relapsed, it would be a huge story. And he said something like, there was also something at the time with like Tony Romo was dating Jessica Simpson. So this guy said to me right off the bat, he's like, AJ, I got nothing for you about Tony Romo and Jessica Simpson. I'm a serious journalist, something along those lines.
Right.
Cut to, I get the photos, I run them on Deadspin. It's a huge story. I get a call from that reporter back, and he's like, AJ, this is so-and-so for the Austin American-Statesman. Wow, you really got a great story here. I just wanted to follow up with some questions. And I said, I'm sorry, I've got nothing about Tony Romo and Jessica Simpson for you. And I hung up the phone. And so that was my attitude at that point. Right. And I think that's, that was the Icarus moment for me. Right. Well, I felt invincible.
I'm not going to defend you because, as you know, some of your behavior, if not a great deal of it, is indefensible. But
yes.
I will say this in your defense, I guess, is that again, you didn't make any bones about who you were and what you wanted to do, and there was this vehicle. This is what I mentioned at the beginning: the intersection of a new media and old laws. In the new media, all those rules you wanted to break didn't exist. In fact, they were counterproductive when you think about it in the long term. So you were the arsonist who someone gave a can of gasoline to and a book of matches.
Yes.
And then you proceeded to burn the world down if you could. All those stories you talked about were not showing up in the New York Post, no Paragon of Virtue itself, or the New York Times. They were different kinds of journalism.
They were.
Anyway,
they would steal my stuff.
Well, afterwards, because
afterwards,
you guys made so much noise that people ultimately had to pay attention to you. Now, again, what happened is that this juggernaut of new media that you are master of in New York City, at a moment in time when the world was opening up to you, now you were a star, intersects with the First Amendment. Mm-hmm. And the clash that resulted was the lawsuit that involved Gawker Media and the story you guys did on Hulk Hogan's sexual adventures with Bubba the Love Sponge's wife.
His best friend.
His best friend. Yes. You know, what are best friends for?
Exactly.
And so the tape exists of Hulk and Mrs. Bubba, and you get the tape. Deadspin's got the tape. Now you didn't go
Gawker's got the tape.
Oh,
I had been promoted, so to speak, to editor of the flagship site, Gawker, in 2020.
Oh, that's right. Right.
Yeah. Well, because I quit Deadspin, and I had said to my boss that, you know, I will probably be one of these guys that comes back to Gawker, because everybody who leaves usually comes back to the nest because it's like no other place on earth to work. And at the time, there's an editor of Gawker named Remy Stern. And when I told my boss that I was going to leave and take another job, he said, well, what if I give you Gawker now? And I said, well, you know, Remy's the editor. And he went and fired him on that spot and gave me the job. So that was the type of man I was working for.
It was the sort of place you were working for. Anyway, so now you're now at Gawker. Gawker gets the tape. You go through 15 minutes or so of soul searching about whether this is a story or not, but somehow or another you run with it.
It was one of those situations where I was like, can I not run with this more than do I want to? Right.
Well, under in the context that you were operating in, this was the Pentagon Papers. Oh yeah, it may be illegal to publish the Pentagon Papers, but we're in the business of revealing stuff that's hidden.
Here's a little larger context for that story: was that, you know, the tape's existence had already been out in the world. So at that point, you're saying, just like, you know, does that make it newsworthy, right? Because clearly other people had spoken about this alleged tape that existed between Hulk Hogan and someone that was making the rounds. Now, Hulk Hogan had also at that point spoken publicly about that he had no idea who this could be. Right, that he was running through a lot of ladies, and while he was single and in the middle of his divorce, so he has no idea who this could be, and it's probably not real. The whole time, in the background, knowing full well that this is probably the tape of he and his best friend, Bubba the Love Sponge, you know, who was at that time sharing his wife with not only Hulk Hogan but others.
It was a tag team match.
Wow, Steve!
Sort of a tag team match, right?
Steve, come on. I mean, but yeah, the thing was there wasn't a question about its newsworthiness, right? There was a question about whether or not I should, when I had the tape, should I run portions of the tape? Now, also in the background, I am doing all of the legwork, so to speak, about kind of just figuring out how this happened to begin with, and trying to get verification on, was this actually Bubba's wife? You know, what was going on? And was really planning on doing a huge story about the Tampa celebrity swinger scene. That was kind of the larger context that I was looking for. So this little Hulk Hogan part was just a minor act in that whole entire play, right?
Yeah.
So, but I needed to start it. So I wanted to start with all the way the Hulk Hogan snippet just to prove that this tape exists, that he was with his best friend's wife, etc. And then I did a whole very florid essay about the state of celebrity sex tapes at that point to accompany it. The lawyer had basically told me, here's the line. It's the minute and 7 seconds that, we can show. You can't go past that line. I was fine with that. So the lawyers signed off on that, right? I don't know how much I could put up there. And didn't think anything of it. It wasn't this blockbuster story for us. It was not. It became a blockbuster story once Hulk started to make the rounds and do a publicity tour for another wrestling league. It was on Howard Stern talking about it for around 2 weeks, right? And then it became bigger as time went on. And then he sued.
Okay. Yes, I'm glad you did that. And I know, incidentally, your efforts just now to give context to what went on and your mindset at the moment are important to you. It's important to you for a lot of reasons. Certainly, it has to do with your continuing sobriety. I understand that. So forgive me if I speed things up, though. Having let you lay that out. It was not to protect myself, obviously. I'm just trying to. No, I know that. It's important.
It's the boring part. It's the boring part. But
it's not boring. It's important. Okay. It's just long. It's just long, man. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, so here's what happens. Yeah. There's a monumental lawsuit. The details of which are another whole story that have to do with a multi-billionaire tech guy who has got a grudge against AJ's guy, Denton, that has to do with homosexuality and outing each other. And he is secretly bankrolling the case against Gawker using the Hogan tape. When the dust settles, Gawker is out of business. Yeah. Nick Denton is like in witness protection. Who knows where he is? And AJ, unbelievably, finds himself not only with no work and a reputation in tatters, but personally liable for millions of dollars.
115 million. Yeah.
115 million. It's laughable until you think about why they sue somebody who clearly doesn't have $115 million. Right. They're beating you over the head. They're going to make sure what they're suing you for is the rest of your life. Right? So when you read about Rudy Giuliani just got sued for $1.3 billion, what they're saying to him is, happy trails, Rudy. This is the end of it for you. You're never coming up with that kind of money. Right. AJ finds himself in exactly that spot. Yeah. Now, in something off the air, you and you'll explain to me how your lawyers lost this case, because I can't for the life of me figure out how they messed this up. But anyway, that's what happened. And it's a big deal. It's a big, awful deal. AJ's life is in tatters. And or how many weeks before the trial did you decide it was time to clean up your personal life?
All right. Well, I'm going to try not to go long on this, right?
No, take your time.
So August of 2015 is when I first made an attempt to get sober. But I also just want to put in the context that, you're asking about how the lawyers lost this. Nobody at Gawker, including myself, who was the defendant, ever thought that this thing would ever get to trial, right? Because these sort of cases are kind of settled out of court, right?
Yes, because the one of the litigants doesn't have enough money to bankroll continuing the fight, but your guy had money. Yeah.
Right. But it also most people do not want to have, if they're suing for emotional distress and basically having their reputation tatters, having this kind of aired in the court of law is basically something most people wouldn't want to go through. Right.
Absolutely.
So I did not get sober because this trial was coming. Right. I was getting sober because I was a mess, right?
Let me stop you right there, because that's a point we have to make. And then I'll let you go as long as you need. Well, what's the old expression they used to say that patriotism is the last refuge of a scoundrel? There are a lot of people, and I'm not one of them, who see somebody get jammed up and immediately go to rehab.
Yeah.
And they view that as, well, that's a career decision or a legal decision. Yeah. That's what that's about.
Right.
I think it's like, and I hope I don't get sued, it's like the Lindsay Lohan technique. She was she would just
exhaustion.
Yes. On the way to the police station to get booked, she would stop in rehab. Anyway, you're going to get sober before this debacle. But what was your life like in terms of substance abuse? What were you doing? Everything?
Yeah, I mean, I have, and I will send you this after this. There's a photo of my coffee table at the time when I was running my own media company. At this point, I had taken some investment money from some heavy hitters who were trying to help me launch my own version of Gawker at a local level. But I was very much into Adderall, Xanax, partying all night, blow. I'd like to describe it as like I love to go up and sideways was how I needed to function, right? That was what I was into. And, it had gotten to the point where I was probably useful about 2 hours on a Wednesday, maybe at most. And I didn't know it had gotten at that point. I mean, it's one of those things where I could not fathom stopping. I'd gone to detox in August of 2015 to get off the Xanax, which I went for 9 days. And it was like I'd run a marathon, right? I was so pleased with myself that I'd made it 9 days in a detox center and then came out. And then, within a month was hitting it hard again. That
trip to detox was that, where did that come from in your head? Did you wake up one morning and go, well, okay, I'm running out of highway on this stuff.
Yeah.
I got to get on top of it. Okay.
Yeah. It was really at a point where I was doing, my ankles were starting to swell every morning. I was pissing the bed a lot. I was throwing up. I was dirty. My tongue was black all the time. I mean, it was just, I was starting to fall apart physically. Right. And, knew I needed to get a handle on this. And then I had I've in the industry that we're in, and especially in New York, there are a lot of people in recovery. I had a friend of mine who had recommended this person to talk to, who was kind of like a fixer for, substance misuse. And she had put me in a detox center after I'd called her. I had the insurance to cover it. So I went thinking really that I was getting a tune-up, right? Was not there to have a complete overhaul. I was really trying to get back to my life where I could drink and smoke pot like a normal person, I thought.
You just wanted to be a functioning crazy person.
I thought I was functioning. I thought I was functioning very well. I thought I was functioning at a super high level. And so one of the things that I started to get into late in life, I'm 41 years old, obviously. At this point too. So hitting it hard, and I got super into acid at that time.
Really?
Because I thought that was really the creative jolt I needed. Like I was dicking around with all this other stuff, but I couldn't really access, the creative energy that I wanted because I was so strung out most of the time. So I started doing a lot of acid.
Did you think at some point, because you're a writer, you're a creative guy.
Yeah.
Were you using drugs to tap into a deeper vein of creativity, or what were you?
No, I was tapping into.
Just wanted to get high. Yeah.
I just wanted to feel good.
Yeah,
I think that just like, one of the things that I recognized once I did get sober was the fact that, I was just like, man, I there's this saying that I think is probably originated in 12-step that, I heard one person say that they were a pretty good drunk. They were just a terrible sober person. Right. That really aligns with me. I could not function without being ill at ease, without being uncomfortable, without feeling like a weirdo, without feeling suicidal, without feeling, mania. All of those things are something that I had for most of my life. And, drugs and alcohol, especially, and frankly, ego and public success were the balm for that. So
you get into this detox for 9 days and you think, well, I did it, right?
Yeah, I did it. Yeah. And I did not do it. I relapsed very, very hard about a month later. And, it was one of those things where I remember going back to my regular bar, which is in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. And I went there at like Friday at 4:00 and I said, I'm taking a break from my sobriety today. And that was like a Friday at 4, and it became Tuesday morning real quick. Like it just did not know how I got where I was. Waking up with the wrong people at the wrong places, and just, all of the stuff that I thought I didn't want to be in that position. Right. I went there hoping that I could have a couple beers and leave. And I could not, right? It was not in me to do that anymore. I could not go half-assed about this, right? I went hard.
Yeah. And it was that point where you went, okay, quit fucking around here. Let's fix this.
Yeah.
Did you go to a residential facility then?
I did. I went to a place in Singer Island, Florida called Harp, which no longer exists because it was one of those places in Florida that was an insurance scam, basically.
Yeah, you should have called me, man. I know the good people in Florida.
Yeah.
Anyway, so how long were you in there?
50 days around that.
Wow.
Wow. So I did it pretty hard. I mean, I went from around mid-October and got out around December 1st. Right. And
in retrospect, when you're in there for those 50 days, in retrospect, looking back, was it working for you there, or were you just going through the motions, or what was your frame of mind when you were in rehab that time?
No, it was working for me. I loved rehab. I mean, it was just like, summer camp for wash-ups, basically. I mean, and I fit in, right? And, I started to get into 12-step there. I really started to get into meditation, all those things. They were working for me, right? And the camaraderie there was great. But once I got out, that's when it hit me that just like, okay, this is where I need to really work hard here. Because in rehab, you're institutionalized. Yeah,
I've interviewed so many people, and I always say the same thing. Every story about substance abuse and recovery is the same, except they're different.
Right.
And one of the things that's regrettable about multiple trips in and out of rehab is that some people go in, not that you did, but some people go in just for what you said. I need a break. I need to get strong so I can go back out and run hard again.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Right.
I still fantasize about that sometimes. Right. Mm-hmm. And my life is wonderful right now. But that was, and as far as convalescence goes, it's kind of great.
It is great.
And I just discovered in sobriety more than anything. It's just, and I was talking, I had a meeting before this, and I was talking about, I had so much help professionally and personally getting helped out of a ditch, right? Pretty significant one. But I love that ditch. I feel much better there most time. I feel more comfortable there, right? And that's one of those things that I have to kind of manage every single day.
Yeah, right.
Those feelings, right?
Because you feel, this is fascinating. You feel estranged from your true self, insofar as the true self is where you felt best. In that dark tunnel, in that trough. Hunter Thompson talked about the music business being a long, dark trough where good men go to die. You felt good down there, right?
That seems like my natural element. That's where I can thrive, right? Yeah, that's where I feel like I belong. Those are my people. I think that's what's great about recovery is you meet a lot of people who's like, yeah, me too, right? It's crazy that I still think that way. Because my life is so good now, so much better. I have a wife and 3 children, and my career is thriving. But yeah, man, I still have that button, right?
Yeah, just so people. Yep. And anybody in what I like to refer to as an outsider, as authentic recovery. It's an ongoing process. If they kid you that it's easy, or they're telling you they don't even think about it anymore, they're probably not telling the truth. This stuff is hard. Yeah. This stuff is hard, man. So again, the process of your sobriety, which is about to coincide with having to give depositions and go into trial. What's the time frame there? You're how sober? How long are you sober before you're sitting in the dock?
It's funny to tell this to people who are in recovery with it. It's just I got out December 1st. I was in court February 28th. That was like the first day of like pre-trial stuff. And I thought I was fit as a fiddle too. Yeah, so, and dipping into AA at that point, just kind of going through the motions a little bit and also not knowing what I was walking into at all. And I don't mean this to kind of slag on the lawyers, but I think it's obvious if you've read anything about the case, was not very prepared for what was to come, right?
Well, I told you, if we had more time, I'd go in great lengths. How the hell did they lose this case? It's just incredible. But anyway, anybody who knows anything about recovery or treatment anyway will tell you that you practically have no chance of succeeding if you don't get at least, and it's the minimum, 90 days in really sort of intense treatment and then halfway house sober living. No one recommends leaving treatment and going to a multi-million-dollar lawsuit.
It's like having reconstructive knee surgery and then joining a roller derby league.
Yeah, exactly. Only with pain involved. Real pain. So here's my question without dredging this stuff up again, because this is something people need to know. Did you at any point during the ordeal relapse?
Not during the trial, but after the trial. When the trial had kind of become very, very public, and I had become, the punching bag for all of Gawker Media's sins, and deserved, rightly so. I'm not going to say that I was not deserving of that sort of treatment, but I was kind of frozen in this weird place where I couldn't earn any money. I had to wait for all this stuff to kind of, I had to wait for the lawyers to basically settle something and get me out of this. But the whole time there's this bigger machine behind this grinding lawfare, as like one friend talked to about it. And that started to wear me down. So I started to act out, right? I slipped is I think what they call it in the biz, right? And not in anything cool, by the way. I started taking, when I was at a medicine cabinet and there were pills there, I would take a couple. I started buying cough syrup and drinking cough syrup because I thought that was allowed, right? I was just and started doing poppers. Amyl nitrate was sort of my thing for a little while. The whole time thinking just I'm not doing anything fun. This is sober, right? And also at the time, it was just frankly, I was just well, I can't really commit to anything with my recovery until this is over, right? And there's that saying in 12-step, which is just anything you put before your recovery, you're going to lose it. And
exactly, yeah.
I was losing it.
Yeah. So we're going to catch up to you, by the way, because you're doing some great stuff now. And I want to talk about your newsletter and everything. People listening who are, and you hear from them all the time, who are dealing with their sobriety and their long-term sobriety, also echo those sentiments about worrying, about slipping, about those old feelings. Can you describe what keeps you sober right now?
Yeah. The thing that has helped me the most is 12-step. Meditation is huge for me. I mean, I do it every single day. Therapy and, really earnest therapy, because I never did that before. And medication, frankly. I mean, that's what keeps me going and upright. And service, however you call that. I'm very, very active in the 12-step community in multiple programs too.
Is it fair at this point? I know that service and community are central to people's successful sobriety, particularly service. Is it fair to say that your dedication to service now is antithetical to who you were during the bad old days?
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah. I mean, I discuss that all the time, where it's just, I wouldn't show up for anybody. I didn't treat anything seriously. I didn't treat my relationships seriously. That's with friends, girlfriends. I didn't treat my job seriously. I never opened the mail. I was basically just one of those guys that even when I was making a lot of money, I was still broke all the time. I mean, it was just, I was just there to exist and fall. So I mean, I was that other people were not a priority for me, right? Ever,
ever.
And now,
except as some means to an end, in some way they could be used.
Transactional relationships was what I was all about. And figuring that part out was just learning how to listen, learning how to be consistent, learning how to do those little baby steps. When people you go to AA for a little while and people talk about, I made my bed today, I went to the dentist, and everybody loses their mind. It's the greatest thing in the world. I get that. It is a huge step in the right direction. It was for me that once I started listening to other people and showing up for other people, that's what I need to do.
Anybody doesn't make their own bed, they got a problem to begin with. I mean, who gets back to bed in an unmade bed?
Yeah.
I couldn't sleep anyway.
I did. I would sleep on my laundry all the time.
Please.
I was the king of sleeping in wet towels, right?
Well, it's also not uncommon to not know what time zone you're falling asleep in. I mean, you're capable of just falling asleep in a different city. Listen, like I said, these stories are all the same, but different. Yours is certainly colorful, if nothing else. And you've come out the other side. You have. I know you take responsibility for your behavior, and you continue to take responsibility for your behavior. Right. So we can put that part of AJ's history behind us and find out what is going on with a newsletter I know you're very passionate about called The Small Bow. Tell us about The Small Bow.
Sure. I mean, The Small Bow is something that I began with a journalism grant, actually, funny enough, around 2 years ago, which I received from a company called Civil, which was a cryptocurrency company. And I had started it with the mindset that when I first got out of rehab and I was looking for articles to read, and because I was pretty savvy about the internet, I figured I'd know where to go. I couldn't find any place that wasn't advertising rehabs again. And I wanted something deeper than that. And I began to find a couple things that I loved. So I said, if I ever get the opportunity to do this type of work that I was doing before again, I'd like to start something like this. And I got that opportunity. So I ran a site for a couple of years. My grant money ran out. I pivoted to a newsletter. I hate to use that word. Sorry for everybody for using that. But the newsletter then became kind of a personal essay type site. It just became focused on me, which I didn't want to do initially because I think that gets very boring. But I'm starting to do, as you've done with your show, is kind of just like look at all facets of the mental illness and recovery and where that falls in this huge spectrum of basically being a better person. Most of The Small Bow is about, for me, how to figure out not to be an a-hole anymore, right? Because that doesn't go away. Those are the things that I need to work on all the time. And obviously the intersection of my former, life as a blogger, it comes up all the time. And because, that was part of my recovery. It was basically recovering from that, from being a persona and trying to be a person. That's part of this. And it's been great because I've connected to more people than I ever had through Deadspin or Gawker. It's crazy.
Yeah, maybe not in sheer numbers, but certainly in impact, because you're sort of like connecting now with people that you need and they need to have connection with. I've read it. It's terrific. I mean, there's great stuff on the site. You survive by subscription, right? Is that how it works?
Yeah, it's a Patreon at this point. But I also, it's helped my freelance career tremendously. And, I signed a deal with iHeartRadio to kind of turn parts of The Small Bow into a podcast, actually. So,
great.
I've just begun production on that. It's supposed to start in the spring. We've done a couple episodes so far. I'm very green at it, but it's my life now, right? So, I'm very happy about it. So I last for a long time.
No, that's terrific. You're going to be as successful as you want to be because you proved that once and unfortunately drove the car into the ditch. You'll be just as successful as you need to be. AJ, thanks so much. I've admired your work for a long time. And again, continued success with the family and the recovery and the sobriety. Thanks, man.
All right, thank you, Steve.
Every storm runs out of rain, according to the great Maya Angelou. Her words can remind us of one very simple truth, that storms do cross our paths, but they don't last forever. So the question remains, how do we ride out this storm of COVID-19 and all the other storms life may throw our way? Where do we turn when issues such as mental health or substance abuse begin to deeply affect our lives? Look to Retreat Behavioral Health. With a team of industry-leading experts, they work tirelessly to provide a compassionate, holistic, and affordable treatment. Call to learn more today. 855-802-6600. Retreat Behavioral Health, where healing happens.
That's it for now. And make us a habit, hanging out at the Behavioral Corner. And when we're not hanging, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter on the Behavioral Corner.